Where in the world are you watching from tonight? Tell me your city, your country, and whether you call it a gas station or a petrol station. As you settle in, let's drift back to a quieter moment by the pump, a small ritual of care that took just 5 minutes and somehow made the road feel like home. The first sound is small enough to miss if you're talking, just a soft, bright note that pops up from the ground the instant your front tyre kisses the rubber hose. Ding! It's not a digital beep or a recorded chime. It's a spring and bell kind of sound, a mechanical bird that lives inside the wall and sings only when a car arrives. You feel it as much as hear it. A tiny lift in the chest, an almost childlike pause as if the place itself noticed you. Roll another foot and the rear tyre taps the hose again. Ding, and now the stage is set. Somewhere behind a smudged window a head turns. Somewhere in a back room a rag meets a pair of hands. You haven't said a word, but you've already been greeted. The driveway is its own little world. Concrete patched with darker grey scars where winter cracked it, faint loops of oil that shimmer when the sun leans just right, and the hose itself, sturdy, slightly flattened from years of duty, stretched across like a quiet tripwire to wake the shop. In summer, heat shivers up from the pavement, and the bell sounds a bit lazier, rounding its edges as if it's been softened by sunlight and the smell of warm rubber. On cold mornings, the ding feels sharper, more metallic, like a tiny hammer tapping a crystal glass. After a storm, water pools in the low places and makes mirrors of the sky, so your car glides in surrounded by clouds. People used to plan for the ding, easing a front wheel toward the hose the way you kiss the corner of a page before turning it. Parents would let a kid do the honours, leaning forward in the back seat with the two small fists clutching the headrest, eyes fixed on the line they mustn't miss. There it is, now watch! The tyre finds the hose, and the bell lifts its head, ding, and the kids smile as the real welcome sign. Drivers learn that if you rolled too fast, you might stack the notes together, ding ding, which felt a little rude, like knocking twice before the door had fully opened. If you went slowly, carefully, you could make a single, perfect ding that said, "We have time." Evening transforms the station into a small theatre. The fluorescents buzz to life under the roof, moths orbiting the corners in slow loop arcs, and the bell becomes the opening cue. The sound carries across the quiet town, over the diner's screen door, past the newspaper box that eats quarters one by one, beyond the bench where two old men reorganize the world each night, and whoever's on duty steps into their role. You can see the movement through the office glass, a figure in a work shirt, name on her oval pull patch, the quick pat of pockets for a pen, the reach for a squeegee already in its bucket, like a musician lifting a familiar instrument. All of it starts because the driveway sang. There is something beautifully democratic about that bell. It doesn't care what you drive or how you're dressed. It plays the same note for a station wagon coated in summer dust, for a gleaming coupe fresh from a weekend wash, for a delivery truck stopping for directions and a cup of coffee poured from a pot that has been on since dawn. The bell doesn't do judgment. It does notice. And to be noticed, without asking, without waving, without stepping out of the car into the wind or the heat, feels like a very old kind of hospitality. Sometimes the ding would drift into the background of your errands, part of the living soundtrack of town life. You'd hear it across the street while counting out change for a pack of gum in the corner store. You'd catch it while walking the dog at twilight, the leash line making its drawing on the sidewalk. You might hear two in a row on the Saturday of a holiday weekend, ding, ding, and know the highway was busy. On school mornings, it would pop like punctuation every few minutes, marking the passage of minivans with science projects belted carefully in the back. On snow days, you might hear nothing at all until noon, and then one lonely ding that sounded braver than usual, like the first bird testing the air. The hardware of it was simple and wonderful. The hose pressed down, the faint push of air nudged a mechanism, and the bell answered. You could stand just inside the office. where the radio whispered a ball game in the afternoons and the coffee smelled like someone had been making it since 1952 and watch for it, waiting to move when the note came. Some attendants could tell the vehicle by the bell, or claimed they could. A pickup's wider stance gave the hose a longer squeeze. A compact's light foot printed a quicker, brighter tone. Maybe that was imagination. Or maybe they had spent enough hours in that echoing room to hear the difference the way bakers hear the change in a loaf's crust when it's fully done. If you arrived while a rain shower drifted through, the bell sounded with a damp gentleness, followed by the slide of water off the roof in a clean silver sheet. The attendant would sometimes wait for the heaviest drop to ease, then step out with a cap pulled low, squeegee in one hand, towel in the other, the bell still completing its after-image in the air. In winter, the ding was permission to bring warmth, a chance to lean close to the driver's window with breath fogging at the edges, to talk just loud enough over the whisper of the heater. In summer, it was a call to shade, to that cool rectangle under the canopy where shadows pooled and the world slowed. The sound invited other small rituals to line up behind it. You might crack the window to let in the mingled scents of gasoline, motor oil, and powdered hand soap, a smell that reads, if you grew up with it, like Saturday chores and road trips at dawn. You might turn down the radio to hear the second ding as the rear tyre cleared the hose, the auditory period at the end of your arrival. You might glance at the rearview mirror to watch the door from the office swing open at exactly that moment, because certain people had the timing down to an art. Children made games out of it, counting how many dings in an hour while their parent balanced a checkbook at the kitchen table in a little apartment above the shop, guessing the make of the car, predicting whether the bell would ring again before the current customer drove away. Teenagers working their first summer job learned to run on the bell, to drop the rag, to set the invoice aside, to be outside with a hello before the echo faded. A well-run station trained itself to respond with the same rhythm every time, so the ding functioned like a promise kept in musical form. Even the way you positioned the car was part of the choreography. Your hands on the wheel, forearms relaxing as you center the hood between yellow posts, eyes cutting down to the gauge you already know by heart, your foot easing off the brake just enough to let the tyre roll that last inch. If you overshot the hose, there'd be a backward roll to make it sing again. If you landed right, there was that quiet satisfaction, the sense that you'd threaded a needle in a moving world. Sometimes you'd see another driver attempt the perfect single ding and nod privately when they got it, strangers sharing a tiny success they didn't have to explain. Late at night, when the town had put itself away and the station's lights smudged a little circle in the dark, the bell felt bigger than it was. A lone traveller pulls in, shoulders stiff from a long run of highway. The bell lifts its voice, ding, and the building answers by shedding its stillness. Someone stands up, someone pulls on a jacket, someone decides it matters that a person has arrived, tired and anonymous and expecting nothing more than fuel. The driveway gives the introduction, and for a few minutes the world organizes itself around that. The question arrives like a small kindness through the crack of your window, half carried by the weather and half by a voice that has asked it 1,000 times without getting tired of it. Fill her up? It's an invitation and a promise in 4 words. You glance at the pump, at the little constellation of price numbers, at your own dashboard needle hovering near a letter it shouldn't be flirting with, and you nod. Sometimes you say regular, or premium if you've got it, or you point with 2 fingers the way your father did. Sometimes you say $10 because money is measured in chores this week, and the attendant smiles, already doing the math in his head and knowing exactly when to ease the handle so it lands just a coin width under your budget. The dance starts with a window that never rolls down the same way twice. On cold mornings it sticks a little, on humid afternoons it glides. You lower it just enough to pass a sentence in a bill, and the air from outside slips in carrying the station's signature blend. Gasoline sharp and metallic, old coffee sweet and stubborn, rubber and wet concrete, a whisper of powdered soap from the sink in the back where knuckles learn to be clean the hard way. The attendant leans in just enough to hear, never so much that you feel crowded. There is a politeness to the posture, part habit, part neighbourhood code. He repeats your words back to you, regular, fierce of fill. A simple echo that makes sure he heard your order and makes sure you feel heard. There are eras folded into that one question. Decades ago, the follow-up might be regular or Ethel. And you'd say the words without even knowing what Ethel is, only that your uncle swore by it and swore at anything else. Later the script changed to leaded or unleaded, and then again to unleaded, regular or premium. By the time touchscreens started showing up, the question was disappearing, replaced by silent prompts and finger-smudged choices. But here, the question survives, because it's faster than any interface and kinder than any menu. The person at the pump will remember what you like if you come by enough. Same as last time, they'll say, and you'll nod, grateful to be known in this plain practical way. If you pay cash, there's a small ceremony to it. Bills folded twice, maybe a quarter lifted from the ashtray where coins go to nap. The attendant accepts money the way a good bartender slides a glass. Steady, eye contact, no rush. If you pay on a tab because it's that kind of town, there's a notebook under the counter with your name in a slanted hand, penciled lines that keep quiet about hard months and write a cheerful 0 when the balance finally catches up. If you hand over a card, it disappears inside with the swish of the office door and the faint scratch of a printer that thinks it's a typewriter. The receipt comes back warm, its corners still remembering the machine. Meanwhile, the nozzle is already in motion. It's heavier than it looks, all muscle and hinge, a piece of simple engineering built to outlast weather and impatience. The cap on your car twists off with that little plastic sigh, and the nozzle slides home with the soft thunk of a tool finding its target. There's a pause, a breath held. Then the first gulp of gas pulls through the hose, and you can feel it if you're the kind of person who notices small things. The hose lifts and tenses like a cat stretching, the pump's meter wakes, numbers spin with a tidy authority, and your car leans on its rear tyre as if relaxing into a chair. Want me to check the oil? Sometimes the question travels with the first one, a 2-for-1 that belongs to an older clock, back when an engine was a thing you tended like a garden. If you say yes, the hood latch clicks and the dipstick slides free, thin and shining, the rag waiting like an open palm. The attendant reads the line with the same focus you use to read a thermometer, and he doesn't dramatize it. "You're fine," he says, or "You're a little low," and either way you feel steadier for knowing. He might top off washer fluid without being asked, because he looked at your windshield and saw dried arcs where blades are supposed to be. He might glance at your tyres and crouch to press a thumb against a sidewall because practice has taught him what proper pressure feels like through denim. While the tank drinks, people talk about weather like it's a mutual friend they've both been tolerating lately. They say heatwave, or they say frost depending on the month, or the conversation sticks to the road. "You headed far?" is a line that means exactly what it says and also means drive safe without making a speech. If you're a regular, the talk might hopscotch to the small loyal subjects. The little league game that froze everybody's fingers last night. The church rummage sale that made $20 feel like a miracle. The shortcut around the new construction that isn't a shortcut unless you know where to gun it on the hill. Names drift through the air with the smell of fuel, names of people who loan each other ladders, names of dogs who've learned that the station sometimes has biscuits in the drawer. Not everyone talks. Some customers simply breathe, eyes on middle distance, grateful for the minute where somebody else is in charge. The quiet is generous here. It lets you keep your day inside your chest without prying. You watch the numbers mount, $7.84, $12.10, $19.65, and catch yourself doing small arithmetic out of habit, figuring miles to go, paychecks until Friday, the way an old song catches you singing before you realize you know the words. The attendant watches too, one hand resting on the pump's handle, waiting for the auto stop, ready to feather the trigger if you called out a number to hit. There's a form of pride in landing exactly at $30, and a skill in letting the last click find $29.99 if you asked him to keep it under. The question itself comes in accents. In some places it's brisk and clipped, fill her up like a line shouted over a crosswind. In others it's rounded and slow, fill her up today, as if the words decided to sit a spell. Some attendants fold the question into your name. Afternoon, Mrs. Pina? Fill her up. Some let it stand alone because there's a poetry to a phrase repeated until it becomes a doorbell for service. It's a phrase that crosses winters and summers, ferocious Mondays and gentle Sundays, prosperous times and tight ones. The tone adapts. On storm days it's protective, on hot days it's friendly shade. Late at night it's a companionable guard at the edge of the light. There are small decisions nested inside your answer. Regular means a kind of pragmatism, a handshake with the ordinary. Premium suggests you're either loyal to your manual's recommendations or in the mood to spoil the engine a little. Half a tank is an errand voice. Top it off carries the echo of a highway. Sometimes your answer includes a destination. Heading to Nana's, going upstate, just back from the hospital. The attendant receives these brief postcards without commentary, unless commentary would help. Watch for deer past mile marker 12. Bridges are a mess, cut over at the feed store. Tell Nana the peaches are good this week. Now and then, a passerby drifts into the scene. Someone on a bike coasts by and nods. The mail carrier slides a bundle of circulars onto the counter inside. A dog regards the world from the passenger seat, index of its day written in noseprints on the glass. The attendant gives the universal dog greeting, 2 fingers tapped on the door, a low, "Hey buddy," and the dog thumps its tail so hard the whole vehicle participates. You can tell the station has seen generations of dogs by the way the attendant's hand automatically checks for a biscuit. The dog knows the word treat in 4 languages and also knows that this place is one of them. The rhythm of the pump has a way of smoothing you out. You might notice the faint clicking of the dial on older units, that hypnotic rotation that used to mark both gallons and dollars, and how the ratio changed as prices climbed over the years. You might notice the hum in the metal canopy, the way wind turns it into a low instrument. You might watch your own reflection in the window, softened by years of small scratches that make everyone look gentler than they feel. The nozzle finds its finish with a decisive clack, and the attendant rests one knuckle against the fender for a second, a tiny thank you to the machine for cooperating. If you asked for a set amount, there's an art to the last few cents. The attendant eases pressure, a painter feathering an edge counting in his head. He lets it stop, considers, then gives the trigger the slightest suggestion. The numbers jump exactly where they should. A raised eyebrow to you, the quiet pride of a good shot. If you said fill, the auto stop makes the call, and he trusts it. He doesn't top off like they used to, because time taught everyone that chasing one more click isn't kindness to the charcoal canister or to the next minute of your life. When the nozzle comes out, there's a practiced twist that steers the last drop into the tank instead of onto paint. The cap returns with its own punctuation, 1, 2, sometimes 3 clicks, depending on the model, and the flap closes like a book you'll open again sooner than you think. The attendant wipes a dribble that isn't there because good habits don't need reasons. If there's a rag left on the hood from the oil check, it vanishes back into the pocket that always smells like citrus degreaser no matter how many times it's washed. Payment finds its way home. If it's cash, there's change, laid out not slapped, coins anchored by the paper so the wind doesn't improvise. If it's a card, it slides back with a pen that writes in the cold and a line showing where to sign, even though everyone always signs in the wrong place. Names bloom in hurried cursive and vanish into the drawer's order. Want your copy? Is asked like you might want to keep a souvenir from a quiet, ordinary victory. There are days when the question is answered by gesture alone, a nod, a thumb, a hand held flat, palm down meaning steady, keep it simple. There are days when the answer comes with a story you didn't know you needed to tell until somebody asked you something so practical it made room for honesty. Rough day, the attendant might say, not nosy, just available. A bit, you might admit, and the nod you get back is worth at least a gallon. Children in the back seat learn the script by heart. They watch the exchange and see how adults talk to strangers without fear, how money moves and comes back, how someone outside can be on your side for 5 minutes. They'll practice the line under their breath and one day roll down the window before you can and say it themselves with a seriousness that makes the attendant grin. Fill her up, please. It's a tiny graduating ceremony, a credential for being part of how things function. And always, in the background, the station's small heartbeat continues. The door chime as someone enters the office for a soda. The murmur of a ball game from a radio that's older than the clock. The soft slap of the squeegee in a bucket. The bell at the driveway waking up whenever a new car nudges the hose. Between those sounds, the question still hangs in the air, welcoming, practical, almost musical in its rhythm. It reminds you that care can be asked for in simple language, delivered without flourish, and felt long after the tank is full. The show begins with a small clatter, a squeegee lifted from its cradle, rubber lip tapping the rim of a square bucket. The water inside is never just water. It's a faintly blue potion that smells of ammonia and lemons, cool as a creek and peppered with a constellation of tiny grey islands. Dust, pollen, road mist, the ghosts of a dozen windshields already made new. The attendant dips the blade, turns it once to baptize both sides, and gives it 2 quick shakes the way a conductor might shake out a baton before the first note. Your windshield is a stage crowded with yesterday. There's the brown punctuation of highway bugs that hitched a ride and didn't survive. The pale powder of pollen that makes spring look soft and makes glass look tired. A faint salt lace at the edges from winter's last tantrum. Greasy crescents where wiper blades have spent the season tracing the same argument. If the sun is low, the mess reveals itself with cruel honesty. Streaks you never knew were there. A gauze of glare that turns the world into a smear. Inside you see yourself in the glass, slightly distorted and sprinkled with small stars of dust. Outside you see the canopy lights and the price numbers printed backward. The squeegee's first contact is almost ceremonial. Rubber settling into the surface with a shiver of sound. Half kiss, half shoe squeak. There's a right way to do it, and people who do this every hour of every day have it stitched into their wrists. Start with the upper corner farthest from the driver because that's where neglect likes to live. Draw the head down in a clean line, keeping the leading edge forward so it peels the water away instead of smearing it in place. At the bottom, a flick of the wrist dislodges the bead and sends it harmlessly into the waiting gutter of the cowl. Back up to the top, overlap by a thumb's width, pull another ribbon of clarity. The rhythm becomes audible if you're listening. Hush, flick, hush, flick. A soft metronome measured in inches of transparency. Between passes, the attendant swipes the blade against the side of the bucket, not the water, to dry the lip and keep the next pull honest. A careful hand uses the far corner of the rubber to chase the little half-moons of fluid that like to cling at the ends of each stroke. A more meticulous hand finishes each lane by running a dry towel along the edge of the glass where water tends to hang like a necklace. This is the part most amateurs skip. It's also the part that makes the difference between clean and why does it suddenly look like I can see forever. On summer nights, the glass holds a film you can't see until headlights explode it into 1,000 slow fireworks. Those are the oily remnants of road and air and insects, and the blue bucket cuts through them with a satisfying honesty. The squeegee leaves behind a wake the colour of new thought, a transparent swathe that makes streetlights sharpen, and the canopy letters snap back into single shapes. If the sun is high, each pass builds a revealing contrast. Muddy, then lucid, cloudy, then clear, yesterday, then now. The body choreography is its own small art. The attendant plants a palm lightly on the chrome or the painted edge of the hood, not for weight, just to steady the long reach, and leans over with a practiced trust in gravity. Tall cars require a bit of a half step into the running board groove. Low cars ask for a bend from the waist that speaks of a back protected by experience. With each stroke, the shoulders make a narrow arc, the elbow leads, and the wrist finishes, like writing a neat line with a fat pen. When the blade squeaks, it means pressure is wrong or the angle is off. When it whispers, everything is aligned. There are seasonal variations on the dance. In spring, the green dust is everywhere, sticky enough to pretend it's not there until rain convinces it to become paste. The first pass in April often makes a milky smear that looks worse before it gets better. The trick is to commit to a second pass immediately, and a third if dignity demands. In summer, the bug cemetery collects at the centre line, a story of miles in tiny wings and legs. Some attendants carry a little nylon pad, no rougher than a kind thought, to coax them free without scratching the glass. In autumn, dew paints the windshield with 1,000,000 repeating circles the size of poppy seeds. The squeegee clears them in ropes that sparkle for a moment in the sun like the path of a comet. In winter, the job shifts from ballet to carpentry. If there's ice, out comes the scraper, a flat, stern instrument that knocks winter loose one careful pane at a time. The best hands angle the blade low, shaving rather than chiselling, letting the glass warm with the engine before attacking stubborn corners where frost hides like a cat under a bed. Then there's the business of the wiper blades themselves. The attendant may lift them like delicate arms and let them rest against the sky. 2 metronomes paused mid-swing. The rubber gets a quick inspection, a thumb run along the length to find nicks or hardening. Sometimes a rag dampened with the blue solution smooths each blade, and you can almost hear the future rain thanking whoever thought to do it. When the arms are lowered, there's a tiny rubbery kiss as they meet the cleaned glass, a promise that the next storm won't be a blindfold. If the windshield carries the long, invisible scars that life insists on delivering, pits from gravel, micro scratches from old dust, those don't vanish, of course, but something about the ritual makes them matter less. Clean glass doesn't pretend to be perfect. It simply stops adding its own confusion to the world's. Headlights at night become points instead of halos. Lane lines regain their song-straight discipline. The face of the person at the crosswalk is suddenly a face, not a notion. Inside the car you feel the change the way a room feels bigger after you pick up a few books from the floor. The temperature hasn't shifted, the engine hasn't sweetened, the radio still murmurs the same verse, and yet your shoulders travel a notch down from your ears. The clutter behind the glass was asking for attention with a kind of background whine you didn't notice until it stopped. Clarity is not just what you see, it's what stops demanding that you squint. Sometimes the attendant will gesture for you to pop the little triangle windows at the front edges, on older cars that still have them, or to crack the main window a finger width so you can reach that wicked inside film that forms over months, the residue of breath, vinyl evaporations, a hint of life's small exhalations. A clean microfiber cloth appears from a deep pocket like a magician's scarf, and with a few tight circles in the corners, the last fog lifts. Those corners are where streaks go to hide and plan their revenge. Getting them now prevents a late-night ambush. There is room in this dance for personality. One attendant prefers long, uninterrupted pulls that run the width of the glass, end to end, each stroke a confident sentence. Another writes in shorter clauses, overlapping little figure eights that erase, then polish. Some hum, some don't. Some say, "Watch this," and turn the blade to attack the lower sweep in a perfect arc that traces the curve of the cowl like a draftsman with a French curve. Some end with a flourish, a quick underhand flick that captures the last bead and sends it flying into the bucket with a drop-size plink. On a wet day, when drizzle is painting everything the colour of patience, the bucket water turns grey in an hour from the fine soot that rain pulls out of the sky. It still works, it just loses the cheerful blue of morning. The squeegee's sound changes too, from whisper to hush, the rubber gliding over a surface already slick. The attendant keeps at it, because even in the rain, a freshly cleared windshield holds a transparency that resists fogging and keeps the wipers' sweep honest. The wipers go back on and suddenly the world performs for you in frames as crisp as a flipbook. Kids in the backseat are connoisseurs of this ritual. They lean forward to watch the blade draw the world in stripes, then sit back when everything snaps into one big unbroken picture. Sometimes a tiny hand appears against the glass from inside, a print that blooms like a flower and makes the attendant smile a little despite himself. A clean rag does a quick inside swipe to erase it, not because anyone minds the handprint, but because the point of the ballet is to give you the moment right after. Nothing on the glass but the day. There are stubborn spots with biographies, a brown dot that only gives up when the blade is held nearly vertical and pressed with the authority of experience. A rainbow smear that announces it came from a drop of oil flung by a truck 2 days ago, answered by a fresh dunk and a slower pull. The attendant learns your car's particular map of difficulty and solves it on the fly, an unspoken craft whose trophy case is just the look of the world afterward. If the station is busy, you might see 2 or 3 windshields cleaned in overlapping time, a small corps de ballet under the canopy lights. The choreography is wordless. One person works the front while another, if they're feeling generous and the line is long, slips along the side to give the rear window a quick rinse as well. Back glass accumulates its own weather, dust curling around the vortex, the squiggle of a rear wiper's short life, and a 30-second pass gives back the road behind you in honest scale. Side windows get a courtesy sweep where hands have been, erasing the sunscreen fingerprint, the dog-nose signature, the loops a child traced absent-mindedly while dreaming of something better than errands. And when the front is finished, really finished, no arcs, no glints, no little commas of water clinging to the edge, you witness the small reset it gives the whole car. The hood looks more like a runway, the dashboard seems more like a cockpit than a shelf of parking receipts. Even the mirror, wiped with the rag's dry corner almost as an afterthought, returns your face without the haze that morning's hurry left behind. The squeegee returns to its bucket with a satisfying seat, rubber nestling into water, handle leaning at the exact angle that says this is not over, only paused. A strand of clean drips from its tip and breaks into orderly drops that land one after the other. Tiny seconds you can hear if you're quiet. The attendant steps back to check the glass from 2 angles, the truth-telling ones, across and down, then makes one last small correction only he could see. The blade whispers, a thin ribbon of water vanishes, the corner smiles. You might not say anything because words would be too big for what just happened, or you might say the standard line, "Thanks, that's better," which is true and too small at once. The person with the squeegee hears it all the same and nods, already turning toward the next pane of yesterday, already dipping the blade into the small blue river that keeps moving the day forward one clear view at a time. It begins with a small hunt, fingers patting along the lower edge of the dashboard for the hood release, a lever shaped like a memory. A soft clack, and the nose of the car loosens its jaw. Outside, the attendant slips his hand under the lip, finds the safety catch by feel, because sight never helps there, and lifts. Some hoods rise with a cooperative sigh on gas struts. Others ask for the thin prop rod to be swung up and nested into a little punched hole that looks like it was made by a careful bird taulier. Either way, the engine bay opens like a toolbox, purposeful, slightly dusty, humming with the warmth of the work just done. A small light sometimes lives under there, a patient glow that turns the engine into a quiet kitchen at night. More often, it's the attendant's pocket flashlight that makes the rounds, a narrow beam that reads the car's face like a doctor's penlight. The first stop is the dipstick, proudly wearing its loop of orange or yellow, as if it knows it's famous. The ritual is swift and practiced. Pull, wipe, reinsert, count to 2 so oil can compose itself, pull again. The rag, old t-shirt cotton gone saintly thin, catches the first smear. The second reading matters. Is the amber sitting neatly between my N and Malcolm Max, or has it slid shyly below? Does the oil read like tea with honey or like coffee a little overdue for a change? Sharp noses can tell more. A whiff of fuel means short trips or something less friendly. A burnt smell suggests heat and timed at a quiet number. Looks good is the most common line, and it carries more comfort than it should. A little low is the other, delivered without melodrama. If the car's thirsty, quart appears from the blue rack, 5W30 or whatever the manual prefers, cap twisted off with a pop that sounds like a knuckle cracking. A funnel goes in the filler neck, its mouth stained by 1,000 small rescues. Pouring oil is an art in patience. Too fast and you paint the valve cover, too slow and you spend the rest of your life here. The attendant pours, waits for the glug to slide down, checks the stick again, and stops at just right. Not one more for luck, because precision is a kind of respect. The coolant check is a glance that keeps its distance. No heroics with caps while things are hot. Everyone learns that lesson once and keeps the scar in their memory. Instead, the translucent overflow bottle does the talking. Mien and Max moulded into the plastic like quiet commandments. In winter, the fluid wears the deep jewel tones of preparedness. Green, orange, pink, depending on the tribe. If the line's low, a jug appears from a shelf with someone's handwriting on the cap 50-50, a measured top-off that brings the meniscus back to proper. If steam's been in the recent story, the attendant clicks tongue and suggests a fuller look sometime soon, not to upsell, just to keep your next mile from becoming a roadside novel. Washer fluid is the cheerful errand of the underhood minute. The cap has a little windshield icon doing a fountain trick, and the reservoir is often a white cavern asking to be filled. In summer, the jug says bug wash, and smells faintly like blue candy. In winter climates, it announces itself with a whiff of something that refuses to freeze. The pour is generous. No car ever complains about being able to see. The satisfaction here is immediate. Later, you'll hit the stalk and the glass will bloom clean with a single sweep, as if someone backstage was waiting for their cue. Belts get a press of the thumb, serpentine in the newer world, a tidy loop of rubber responsible for far more than any one belt should be. A chorus of V-belts in the older stories, each singing for its own pulley. A quick twist checks for cracks, a brief push listens for the line between snug and songbird squeal at startup. If squeal has been part of your morning soundtrack, the attendant hears it in your description and nods. Yes, tension or wear, and makes a mental note to mention it when handing back the change. Hoses get the same palm reading, firm but not stony, supple but not soft, ends dry where clamps bite. A dark wet ring around a clamp is a whisper worth hearing now, not on the shoulder of a bridge in rain. The battery sits there like a square, stubborn heart. Terminals are either clean enough to eat off, someone loves this car, or furred with green crystals that look festive and are not. A wire brush appears, the swift rasping sound like sandpaper thinking out loud. Some attendants keep a little box of baking soda under the counter for this exact moment, A home remedy that fizzes away trouble. A spritz of protector finishes the small kindness. Cables get a tug test, tight, not theatrical. If the battery wears a date sticker, eyes do the math the way you did with the pump dollars. Years since install, winter survived, the season when cold mornings start to ask for favours. Air filters tell a simple truth when held to the light. New ones show daylight through pale pleats. Old ones make the sun work for it. The clips on the box pop with satisfying reluctance. The cover tilts, the element lifts like a thick book. A filter seeded with leaves and one inexplicable popcorn kernel becomes a tiny comedy show. Shake, tap, decide. A careful knock to evict the worst, or a suggestion to swap it when time allows. If you say go ahead, a crisp new rectangle goes in, the box size closed, and the engine's next breath will be less of a chore. Some cars still offer a transmission dipstick, a disappearing species. If yours does, the ritual repeats with a different fluid, cherry or brown, smell as important as colour, level checked, warm and idling, park set. The attendant's sleeve angled out of harm's way. Many modern cars hide this away, and the attendant knows the difference, doesn't go fishing where manufacturers have closed the lake. Brake fluid sits quiet in a small reservoir with a cap that doesn't like to be bothered. It's not for topping casually, so the check is mostly a look. Level within marks, colour not turning the shade of tea left too long. A low line can mean many things, and this is not the parking lot for those conversations, but eyes note it, and voice mentions it gently, because brakes are the one part of a car that should never have mysteries. While the hood is up, the attendant's eyes perform a quick census. Any leaf drifts trapped in the cowl get plucked. A plastic bag flirtatiously wrapped near a radiator fan gets escorted away before it becomes a confetti maker. A mouse nest is a country song discovery, told later with a shake of the head and held up with 2 fingers for the laugh. The radiator's fins get a respectful glance, straight enough to do their cooling, not clogged with a summer's worth of gnats. The fan shroud sits securely, the overflow hose actually reaches the bottle, the oil cap is seated, not half-cocked from a distracted DIY. Sound is part of the check. A rough idle tells its tale, a ticking lifter writes short sentences, a hiss where no hose should hiss raises eyebrows. The attendant doesn't diagnose like a shop manual, but experience writes shortcuts on a person. A loose heat shield clinks its coin in a jar trick. A misfire gives a rhythm nobody wants to dance to. If something sings off key, you'll hear a neutral note. Might want to have someone listen to that. Not a scare, not a shrug, just a line that keeps you from thinking you imagined it. If you're the talkative kind, questions come out in this minute. You think I can make it to the lake and back? What's that sweet smell? Is that belt supposed to look like that? Answers are honest and size to the moment. Yes, probably. Coolant sometimes smells like maple when it sneaks away. That belt will want attention before the first frost. The best attendants never make you feel foolish for not knowing. Cars are villages of small systems, and nobody knows the whole town on day one. The rag gets folded and refolded, revealing a clean quarter for every new touch. It's a small courtesy, like turning a pillow to the cool side. The prop rod slips back into its clip with a tinny tick. Gas strut hoods settle like the lid on a favourite pot. Before closing, the attendant always clears fingers, caps, and tools from the danger zone. No one forgets the time a hood kissed a flashlight and learned a dense vocabulary. The close itself is a decisive action, not a slam, a drop from 6 inches that lets the latch do its job without turning the whole front end into a drum. Sometimes there's an extra gesture that belongs to a certain era, a grease pencil mark on the airbox with the mileage, a small white sticker for the windshield corner, next oil change at 89,500, date inked in a hand you can read. It's not binding law, it's a friendly note to your future self. You'll see it later in traffic and think, right, soon. All told, the Under the Hood Minute is mostly about tidying the part of the journey you never see while you're driving. It's a check that asks nothing loud and prevents 1,000 small inconveniences. The beauty of it is how much can be learned with a light, a rag, and habits older than touchscreens. Levels in their lanes, lines where they should be, rubber that still flexes, wires that still mind their manners, everything clicking shut with the quiet confidence of a drawer that glides instead of scrapes. You roll the window down an inch to catch the last of the conversation. You're set. And the hood's last thud makes a punctuation mark that promises the road ahead belongs to you again. It starts with a cap the size of a thimble. 2 twists and it's in the attendant's fingers, plastic, sometimes metal, sometimes green, if someone once paid for nitrogen and wanted the world to know. The valve stem stands there like a tiny lighthouse, and the hose snakes over the concrete with a lazy authority. Weight in its rubber bones, faint black dust on the palm where you guide it. Somewhere a compressor coughs awake and settles into a steady hum, a machine breathing under the floor. The first sound is always the little psst, the quick sigh the tyre gives when the gauge touches down. A pencil gauge is the classic. Silver tube, chalk white ruler inside, numbers stamped like a secret code. Press straight, not crooked. Firm, not cruel. The stick jumps and holds a mark, 28, 30, 34, and the attendant reads it the way a baker reads dough. A dial gauge has a needle that swings and settles, a tiny clock face you only ever check for this one kind of time. The digital ones beep, efficient and charmless, but even they know this is ritual. The attendant doesn't guess. He measures. Kicking a tyre tells you nothing but that shoes have opinions. Air has weight, and tyres are where your entire life meets the road in 4 handprints of contact. Too little pressure, and each hand spreads itself thin, shoulders wearing first, the carcass running hot, sidewalls flexing like a tired ankle. Too much and the hands become fingertips, centre wearing fast, the ride twitchy, every pebble interviewing your spine. There's a sticker on the driver's door jamb that knows the right number for this exact car, cold pressure, morning truth 32, 35, sometimes different front to rear. The sidewall's max isn't an instruction, it's a boundary. The attendant knows the difference, and if you ask, he'll show you the sticker. Run a finger under the line like a teacher who likes you. Cold mornings tell on everyone. First frost of the year, and a dozen TPMS lights bloom like little amber suns. Horseshoes with exclamation points, wagging their fingers. Air contracts when it's cold, gains a little swagger when it's hot. Every 10 degrees of weather is about a pound of pressure's mood swing. The attendant hears the click of the bell, sees the dashboard glow, and already knows the number he'll add before you say a word. He doesn't scold the light, he quiets it. Jose on, trigger feathered. The filling sounds like soda fizzing behind a wall. The gauge checks again. If he's good, and most of them are, he lands the needle on the exact integer you asked for, not a ½ pound over to show off. Precision is politeness. There's a physicality to the stance. He crouches with one knee down, 1 foot flat, hose looped once to tame its weight, thumb locking the chuck square to the stem. His other hand cups the gauge. The whole thing is a triangle of calm. If a cap rolls away, he'll trap it with a knuckle before it disappears into the world's collection of lost chess pawns. In summer heat, the hose is warm and pliant. In winter, it fights like a stiff rope, and the small psst that escapes during the swap is a cold kiss on the fingers. Old-timers keep a pocket of caps because the world sheds them, and a naked valve is an invitation to dust and weather. Tread talks if you listen. The shoulders feather when alignment is a little philosophical. The centre goes bald when pride met a high-pressure number. Both edges thin when someone has been driving on soft pillows. He'll run his palm across the rubber, reading it like braille, then pinch a tread block and rock it a little to check stiffness. There's the penny test. Lincoln's head, Rain's odds. But the practiced eye doesn't need currency to know when channels are becoming suggestions. On wet days, he'll mention hydroplaning in the friendly way of someone who has once surfed unwillingly across an intersection and would like you not to audition for the same show. The air machine itself has two temperaments. The coin-op island out by the hedge is a timekeeper with opinions. 2 quarters to wake it, the motor buzzing with a deadline, hose crammed into a steel mouth. In the full service lane, the hose is simply there, a domestic tool like a broom. Sometimes the compressor cycles in the back, whoomp, 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 and you feel it in your shoe soles. That thrum is reassurance, the building reminding you it's a place where problems get smaller by pounds per square inch. There are 4 tyres to check, and ritual means all 4, even when the first one was low and the second one feels fine to your thumb. Each stem gets its turn, each number is its own little verdict. If one is adorable while the others are stoic, say 24 when the rest are 33, there's a story there. A nail maybe, a valve core with a slow opinion. The attendant rolls the tyre forward with his palm, scanning for bright points, metal glitter that doesn't belong, a screw head doing its innocent face. If he finds one, he won't yank it. That turns a slow leak into a plot twist. He'll spit a little soapy water from a bottle and watch for bubbles mapping a quiet escape. "You've got a slow one," he'll say, and somehow it doesn't feel like bad news, because now it has a name. The spare lives a secret life. Donuts hide in trunks with folded maps and ice scrapers from 2 cars ago, losing air because nobody remembers they breathed too. On a conscientious day, the attendant asks permission, "Mind if I check your spare?" And up goes the trunk floor. A little world of blankets and jumper cables and the long wrench that has never met a lug nut it didn't want to round off. The spare's valve winks like a forgotten earring. 20 psi where it should have 60, as common as a song. He fills it while you watch, the donut swelling from apology to plan. And you suddenly feel like someone locked the back door you weren't sure about. There's an art to equalizing. After the first fill, heat from driving and the act of compressing itself will nudge the numbers. The attendant knows to check again after a minute, not to chase decimals, just to make sure all 4 corners agree on reality. Agreement is the soul of a car that tracks straight, brakes evenly, and doesn't wander when a truck passes on the highway. He may chalk a tiny dot near each stem, front left, front right, as a personal breadcrumb when he does rotations later, but that's shop law, not driveway theatre. Nitrogen used to be a conversation in these places, green caps like little flags. The pitch was slower loss, more stable pressures across temperatures, a feeling of technological comfort. The attendant, if you asked, would answer with the shrug of experience. Dry air is already mostly nitrogen. The real gains are in checking things and not pretending caps do magic. Then he'd add, "But if you like the green caps, I've got a few, because sometimes a ritual needs its talismans. Altitude has its own quiet effect. Mountain towns live their lives a few psi different from sea level ones. And long road trips can teach a tyre new manners. He has stories about families who rolled in from the desert with the numbers walking tall from heat, about the way snow days fill the lot with lights blinking, about the Thanksgiving cold snap when he checked 50 cars before lunch and every single one drove away steadier. Pressure becomes a communal weather report. Everyone participates. You notice the way your car settles when the last tyre hits its mark. It's not dramatic, just a small squaring of shoulders, a sense of quality at the corners. Steering on the test turn out of the bay feels less talkative in the wrong ways, more communicative in the right ones. At a crawl, the tyre hum smooths. At a stop, the sidewall bulge looks like confidence, not fatigue. The attendant sometimes gives a tyre a friendly thump with the back of his hand, a drummer's last check of the kit, or spins the valve cap on with a flourish that says, "Small things deserve style." Valve cores are tiny tyrants when they misbehave. A slow hiss after the chuck pulls off means a speck of grit or a core that's decided to be elderly at an inconvenient hour. The fix lives on a pocket key that looks like nothing and does everything, a little fork tool that snugs the core with a half turn. The hiss stops, pressure stays, the day decides to be simple again. If a stem cap has that rubber gasket inside and it's missing, a new cap appears without ceremony because weather won't wait for good intentions. Sometimes a customer apologizes for not knowing any of this, and the attendant waves it off. "That's why we're here," he says, not as a slogan but as a weather statement. He might show a kid how to read the gauge. "See where the white part stops. That's your number." And the kid will push the stick in 3 times just to watch it jump, discovering a new category of satisfying. He'll tell a teenager with a first car to check once a month and before long trips, to do it in the morning, to trust the sticker, not the myths. He'll tell the delivery driver that underinflation steals fuel, and the driver will nod the way people nod when their wallet hears a sermon. On wet nights, little crescents of water gleam in the tyre grooves like parentheses. On dusty afternoons, the rubber wears a fine ash that lifts in a puff when the hose drapes across it. Air carries smells, the mineral tang of the compressor, the warm sock scent of tyres after a highway run, and a soft air leak whistle is distinct from the white noise of a busy road. Your ear learns these differences if you stand around long enough, which is how you realise these 5 minutes have always been partly about attention disguised as maintenance. Pressure is a number, yes, but it's also a feeling. How the wheel returns to centre after a turn, how the car stops without a question mark at the end, how fatigue arrives later on long drives because the tyres aren't working double shifts. Overfull tyres chatter over expansion joints. Soft ones add a sleepy wobble in crosswinds. The right number is polite, it stays out of the conversation until you need it. When it's done, the caps go back on, never forgotten, seated with the 2 fingers, not gorilla tight. The gauge gets wiped with the corner of a rag so it won't track black smudges into a pocket. The hose returns to its hook with a lazy loop, metal coupler finding its rest with a click that sounds oddly satisfied. The compressor idles into silence, saving its breath for the next arrival. You glance down one more time at the tyres. Circles of compromise turn circles of promise, and the attendant is already bending toward the second car that just rang the bell, the psst of the next check already rising in the cool air. It used to begin with a question asked the way you ask someone if they're hungry. Where you headed? Not just a destination, but a little biography hidden in a place name. You'd name a town or a lake or my aunt's place past the dairy. And the attendant would tilt his head like a dog catching a frequency. The map lived under the counter, laminated and a little warped from summers, and came up with a slap and a coffee ring that had dried into an eclipse over County Road 8. Some stations kept an atlas with a cracked spine, others a drawer full of fold-outs that bloomed like big paper flowers and never went back quite the same. Every map smelled faintly of dust, gasoline and pencil shavings. He'd smooth the paper with both hands, flattening yesterday's creases, and grab the short golf pencil that had teeth marks at one end. "Okay," he'd say, "you're here," tapping the intersection by the station with a fingernail that had permanent oil under it, no matter how much pumice soap tried to argue otherwise. Then the route would draw itself out of his wrist, straight until the second light, not the first. Bare right where the road forgets it's straight. Left after the brick church that leans like it's thinking. Lines weren't always straight, but his voice was. Distances arrived in minutes rather than miles, because locals measure in time. About 15 minutes if you don't get stuck behind the feed trucks. 20 if you wave at everyone. Landmarks made the compass. You'll pass a red barn with a quilt square painted on the side. That's your sign to get in the left lane. Or, there's a dog who thinks he owns the road just past the old mill. He's all talk, but give him a wide berth. Or, you'll think you missed it when the pavement ends, but you didn't. Keep going till the dust feels like it's becoming a decision, Then look for the mailbox shaped like a trout. These are directions that work even if you've never met a mile marker. They're kindness disguised as data. If the weather was in a mood, the map got extra attention. Rain made the pencil stutter, so he'd reach for the stubby highlighter with a lid that never fit right and trace a yellow ribbon from the station to your turn so it would shine even under a clouded sky. On fog mornings, he'd add a note in block letters. RIXINGNOARMS, because the crossing down by the silos liked to play peekaboo. In winter, he inserted advice like a parent. Avoid Ridge Road after dark if it's icy. The north slope keeps secrets. He'd angle the map a little, sighting along the line for curves, the way a carpenter checks a straight edge, then slide it toward you with the pencil on top like a baton being passed. Tourists were easy to spot, the polite uncertainty at the door, the accent that rounded off gasoline, like it had been to finishing school, the rental tag hanging on a key fob. They'd say petrol or kilometres, and the attendant would nod as if this was all just vocabulary. 35 miles, he'd say, then translate into 55 kilometres, happy to be bilingual in the ways that counted. He'd ask, "You want scenic or fastest?" And most people never realised they'd been given a philosophical choice. Scenic added 5 minutes and a memory. Fastest shaved 2 and stole a story. If you chose scenic, his grin got a corner to it, and the pencil took a different road to show you where the river loops like a question mark and where a roadside stand sells peaches that taste like the sun took a day job. Sometimes directions refused to be contained by paper. The attendant would walk you outside and point with his whole arm, as if painting a stripe on the sky. "That way's east, the lake sits there," he'd say, and you'd feel the world click into place because now it had a backbone. He'd trace an invisible route through the air, down past the water tower, hang a right where the pavement looks new because the county just got around to it. Then left where the big cottonwood makes its own weather. A hand on the shoulder of the landscape, calm and confident, and suddenly you knew which way to face. There were microgeographies every local knew. The stretch where cops like to nap with radar guns, generous on Tuesdays but not Fridays. The curve that tightened at the last second as if it wanted gossip. The intersection where a right turn on red was legal but not wise, because sunlight there turned mean around 5. He might not say all this unless you looked particularly weary or particularly young, but he'd tuck 1 or 2 warnings into the story like a parent cutting grapes in half without making a fuss. If you were really lost, the kind of lost that wrinkles a forehead, he'd perform cartographic triage. "Okay, show me the last thing you were sure about." You'd say there was a mural with a spaceship, and his face would light up because he knew exactly the back of the hardware store that had painted that for a summer festival 10 years ago and never took it down. Or you'd say, so we crossed a bridge and then the road split by a diner, and he would answer, "Green roof, good pie," and the map would snap into alignment like 2 magnets finding each other through a table. You'd watch a stranger reorder your day with small facts until confidence returned to your hands on the wheel. Phones on cords used to live on the wall by the cigarette rack, and sometimes he'd use one to call ahead for you. "Hey Nancy, I've got a couple heading your way for the Blue Heron. You got a room?" Rooms were held with a name and a promise. Routes were held with a pencil line and trust. If it was after 9, he might call the diner 2 towns over to check when they stopped serving hot food. "Tell them you're the folks from the station. They'll keep soup warm." Kindness threaded through logistics like it always belonged there. There were also the Flipsburg AAA triptychs stacked behind the counter, like secret handbooks with roads printed in vertical strips and detours marked with orange tape. He'd pull one if you were crossing 3 counties and wanted to avoid the interstate's flat glare. "Take this," he'd say, flipping a page with his thumb. "When you hit the end of a strip, flip it like this. It'll make you feel like you're winning at something." He'd mark construction zones with a small frown and circle a scenic overlook with the same pencil that circled your total on a receipt. In the city, Doriatians had their own dialect. Stay on Elm till the street gets narrow and the trees start trying to shake hands overhead. Go past the bakery that smells like Saturday, then right at the mural of the horses. He'd add cautions about one-way streets that multiply after dark and where delivery trucks pretend they're parked legally. In the country, directions preferred the poetry of features. The field with hay bales lined like punctuation, the hill where your ears pop, the curve where deer hold evening meetings. The Glovebox Atlas came out sometimes, pages frayed, counties foxed at the edges, a bookmark that was really an old raffle ticket. Couples argued gently over it at the counter, and the attendant would referee with a smile. Those routes will get you there. Hers will be prettier, yours will be 5 minutes faster. Depends on what you need today. It felt like marriage counselling with contour lines. He'd sometimes repair a torn fold with tape that had gone yellow for a decade, aligning rivers like a doctor setting a bone. Not all directions worked the first time. People came back, cheeks pink with embarrassment. We hit the railroad tracks. Ah, then you went one too far, he'd say, and draw an extra tick mark on the map between lights, because the mind counts differently under stress. Or, we never saw the red barn, and he'd nod gravely. They painted it grey last fall, I keep forgetting. Look for the tractor tyre painted like a snowman. Landmarks change. Kindness stays. He updated his mental Rolodex of the county the way you update your phone. Little changes, made quietly so the next traveller gets better directions than the last. Truckers had their own questions. Clearances and weight limits. Places where a 53-footer would feel like a person wearing a suit, 2 sizes too small. The attendant knew the railroad trestle on Maple sat at 11 feet 6 inches, and the posted 12 feet on Miller was wishful thinking in the middle. He'd sketch a wide route with room for mistakes, add a note about the best place to park a rig if you want a slice of pie, the circumference of a steering wheel, and throw in a warning about the corner where the pavement heaves in heat and likes to grab trailers by the heel. On some afternoons, a line would form not for gas but for directions. Out-of-state plates, a minivan full of kids with the bored comic timing of summer, a motorcyclist with road dust up to his knees, the schoolteacher who'd lived here forever, but never needed to go to the county courthouse until today. The counter became a small classroom. The attendant passed the pencil around, let people draw their own routes while he narrated, "Good. Now label that old mill road so you don't doubt yourself later." Strangers compared notes about a turn that feels wrong but is right, and you realise that everybody is figuring it out as they go. Night brought its own cartography. At dark everything looks farther, he'd say, and then adjust your landmarks to neon. Turn left at the sign for the bowling alley. It flickers. You'll know it moonlit roads got star instructions. The highway runs under the Big Dipper here. The lake throws a silver stripe across the lane just before your turn. If rain turned the world into a watercolour, he'd mark places where puddles pretended to be ponds and tell you how to skirt them with your dignity intact. If snow erased familiar lines, he'd swap look for to listen for and describe how gravel sounds under tyres is just before the driveway you want. Sometimes he'd glance at you, at the wear in your eyes, and make an executive edit. You can get there the way you were thinking. Or you can stop 5 miles short at the overlook, see the town from above, and then decide if you still need to go tonight. Directions weren't only about roads, but about permission to take the turn you didn't know you could take. People returned with the news. We found it. We never did see the cottonwood, but we found the trout mailbox. Trout mailbox now, not later on the map. The diner saved the soup. The attendant would draw a tiny check mark next to a route in his mind. He collected these confirmations the way other people collect bottle caps. Small, satisfying proofs that the world still cooperates when asked nicely. Over time, the paper maps frayed and phones took over, but even the glow of a screen sometimes found its way to the counter when a voice said recalculating for the 3rd time. The attendant would lean over the glass of your device and laugh softly. "It's not wrong," he'd say, "it's just literal. Go the way it says, but when it tells you to turn at pine, wait for cedar instead. Pine is a rumour till the county puts the sign back." And the pencil would come out anyway to draw a clear arrow on a napkin, because there's still nothing like a line made by a person who has already driven the road you're about to meet. You'd slide the map back into its sleeve, fold it wrong without getting scolded, tuck the napkin in your pocket like a talisman, and carry with you not just instructions, but a sense that the world was populated by people willing to draw you a line from confusion to somewhere, making the distance between 2 points feel less like math and more like company. It was the era of little victories, and the proof lived on paper you could hold in your hand. After the pump clicked and the nozzle found its holster, after the windshield gleamed and the hood dropped with that comfortable thud, the attendant would duck into the office and return with a small fan of rectangles, stamps the colour of spring leaves or dusty skin. "You're at 8 now," he'd say, licking a thumb, pressing 4 perfect squares into the book you kept in the glove box, or the kitchen drawer next to batteries that didn't fit anything anymore. The stamp had a tiny ornamental border, a number that meant something if you knew the conversion, and a promise printed in type so small you had to tilt it toward the light. One tank at a time, you were walking toward a lamp for the den, a set of juice glasses with sunbursts in the base, a toaster with chrome so bright you could see the morning in it. Some stations had their own currency, punch cards with 10 circles that filled up like a moon calendar, each visit earning a satisfying chick from the hand punch. Others dealt in trading stamps that every store in town complicated your wallet with. The grocer, the hardware shop, the station on the corner. Double Stamp Tuesdays multiplied excitement sent like a chalkboard sale, and you time your errands accordingly. A full-service fill, windshield, oil check, tyre pressure, the whole ballet, and a handful of stamps slid across the counter like a tip from the universe for being the kind of person who kept the car and the week in working order. Stamps had their own weather. They liked stacks and envelopes, coffee rings and a soft breeze through a screen door. They stuck to each other or refused to stick at all depending on the humidity, which is why every kitchen had a sponge and a little dish by the phone just for stamp days. Children served as unpaid lick and stick specialists, their tongues turning papery and sweet with glue, their fingers blackening with the soft ink that migrated as you pressed the little squares into grids. A full page gave the same satisfaction as a completed puzzle. You'd smooth a palm over the finished sheet and feel the months settle into place. Redemption centres were secular chapels of desire. A counter at the back of the station, a section by the windows, or a proper storefront on Main, where shelves held the catalogue made 3-dimensional, pressure cookers in boxes with cheerful people printed on the sides, towel sets folded into clouds, a blender whose blades looked like they could make snow. People came in holding books plump with progress, set them down with the gravitas of savings bonds, and pointed, "That one," like pirates finally standing over the living X. The clerk did the math with a pencil and a small frown of concentration, then slid the prize across the counter with a smile that said, "You kept going." Sometimes you were just shy, 2 pages short, and there'd be a small negotiation with yourself in a parking space about whether to trade down to the set of mugs with the wheat pattern or keep collecting and hold out for the kettle that whistled. Not all rewards waited. Some came right then, like confetti at the end of a parade. A keychain shaped like a tiny gas pump, red and white and willing to carry your house on it. A calendar full of square days and moon phases, with the station's name at the top like a signature on the year. Matchbooks with the company's star or shell or dinosaur, useful and strangely reassuring in a pocket. Free air for the tyres was the baseline kindness. But a free matchbook could make a cigarette look like a small ceremony rather than a habit. There were vinyl decals with mascots. Smiling, bold, faintly absurd meant For the quarter window or the bumper if you were the type to let brands draft in your slipstream. You'd see them in driveways up and down the street, subtle signals of allegiance the way a team cap isn't just a cap. Windshields had their own currency in tiny rectangles stuck up into the corner where they could keep quiet vigil. The oil change sticker, transparent film, a line of handwriting and squeaky blue ink. Mileage now, mileage next, date like a whispered reminder. On hot days, the edges curled like potato chips, but the numbers stayed legible, a little appointment card for a future favour. Some stations like to use small translucent colours for seasons, green in spring, orange in fall, so the corner of your view turned into a file drawer you could read by glancing upward at a traffic light. When the station sponsored a Little League team, a sticker appeared by the cash register with the kid's name and the schedule printed in tidy rows. "Take one," the attendant would say, sliding a small stack toward the parent paying for washer fluid. You'd press it to the fridge or the side of a filing cabinet and discover you'd become a person who knew when the Tigers played the Cardinals and at what field to bring camp chairs. The baseball schedule magnet arrived each April, grid of opponents' squares of ink, months pre-solved into a shape. It clung to the fridge next to a clipping about a school play and a water bill, with the corner dog-eared because you were remembering to remember. Promotion sometimes ran like a soap opera through a summer. "Collect all 4 glasses," the sign said, and the glasses had embossed ridges and names, Monday through Thursday, or cities or birds. You'd get one with each fill and the cupboard would look like it belonged to a bar that only served iced tea. Some families never drank from anything else. The glasses washed cloudy with hard water and still felt like prizes. Other weeks, it was plates, sturdy, with a ring of colour, heavy enough to thunk pleasantly on a table that knew the weight of work boots. Gas-bought meals nobody cooked. Nobody complained about the economics. Children learned to ask for the decal for being good, and attendants learnt the dramaturgy of making a show of considering before granting it. A dinosaur sticker peeled with a sound like a tiny unzip. The kid would accept it solemnly, as if this were something that came with responsibilities, and then put it off-centre on the rear window so that for months the world included a small prehistoric companion waving you into lanes. Sometimes there were iron-on patches for jackets, or a plastic ruler stamped with the station's name and a conversion chart that could turn inches into centimetres and gallons into litres, as if that were alchemy you might need at any moment. Punch cards bred friendships. "You're at 9, the attendant would say, and if someone asked from across the bay, "What happens at 10? He'd answer without looking up, "Free wash." The car wash token, a little metal coin with ridges around the edge, felt heavier than its size recommended, a promise disguised as pocket change. You'd slide it into the slot on a day when your car wore salt like old makeup and watch the blue curtains of the wash pull down a new version of the machine you trusted with your commute. "Compliments of Pete's," the attendant would say, chin flicking toward the office where Pete counted invoices and learnt employees' birthdays. The stamp book lived a double life in some houses, a budget and a game. Rainy afternoon, the kitchen table turned serious with glue and arithmetic. Someone would read from the catalogue and someone else would glance at the piggy bank, weighing the merits of an electric carving knife against a set of sheets that matched the colour of sunset. "We're 40 stamps short," someone would conclude, and a plan would be made to fill up on Thursday because Thursday meant double. The car's tank became a treasury, the road a route to a toaster. Stickers kept memories even when the promotions had passed. Old decals faceted light in the back window, their colours faded to the tone of childhood photos. A Support Your Volunteers badge lived near the tailgate handle, curling at the corners and refusing to surrender its optimism. A city permit remained ghosted onto glass long after the expiration, the outline of bureaucracy softened by time. When you sold the car, you'd catch yourself scraping at a sticker with a thumbnail, then stop, deciding the next owner could inherit this archaeology. There were scratch-off games, briefly, the kind with silver rectangles you rubbed away with a coin until the future slid into view. Prizes ranged from a free coffee to a toolbox nobody you knew ever saw. The station's counter collected a snowfall of grey dust from these little attempts at luck. Folks scraped with nickels and bright eyes. Laughter bubbled up out of the ordinary. Even losing felt like participating in the community of trying. Receipts sometimes wore an ink stamp with a date or the station's emblem, thump on the paper like a seal from an embassy. You'd tuck it into the visor or the ashtray, or the zipper pocket of a purse, knowing that the paper trail of your life was a thin ribbon that stretched through years and carts and counters. Carbon copies of credit slips, zigzag top edge, a whisper of the raised numbers pressed into life by the metal imprinter, stacked like were playing cards under the register's drawer. The attendant would tear your copy loose and fold it into thirds with a crispness that made you want to fold your laundry better. Truckers and salesmen had their own reward economies, often quietly kept, a free coffee after midnight, a donut added to the bag because weather had been unkind, a strip of beef jerky laid on the counter with the words for the miles, like an amen. Loyalty wasn't a program, it was a handshake repeated. The station kept a pot that could travel from rocket fuel to last-ditch comfort without warning. The lid creaked. The smell was part bitterness, part hope. A free cup handed across with eye contact could repair a small corner of a day. Community lived in the small rectangles. Local high school fundraiser. The station sold raffle tickets with perforated stubs and explained which prize to root for. Blood drive? A sticker that said "I gave" went on a chest, and the person wearing it got a nod as if they'd had their oil changed in the right season. The corkboard by the door was a mosaic of business cards, lost cat notices, a flyer for a concert in the park. The attendant would sometimes pin a free car wash coupon to a notice that needed attention, like a magnet for kindness. Even the absence of rewards was a kind of lesson. Some people declined stamps. "Save them for the next gal," they'd say, and the next gal would get an extra sheet with an embarrassed little laugh that warmed the place for 5 minutes. Others would bring back glassware with a chip and get a replacement without a receipt, because everyone knew new cups sometimes met old sinks. The station's generosity was a kind of weather pattern, predictable enough to plan around, surprising enough to make you believe in a day that could turn nicer than the forecast. Years later, people would open a box while moving and find a book half full of stamps from a station that became a bank that became a cafe. The glue would have lost its will to cooperate, but the tiny designs still looked determined. You'd page through and remember the sink you earned 1 tank at a time, the night you drove across town for double stamps because you were this close to the table lamp that made the living room feel intentional, the way a kid at your knee slapped wet stamps into perfect rows and learned the math of patience and progress without anyone having to stage a lesson. If you climbed into a car even now and glanced into the corner of the windshield, some ghost of the system would still be there. A fresh little sticker from a quick lube place with mileage written neat. A loyalty punch card clipped to the visor with a paperclip. A magnet on the dash that says the tyre shop does rotations free if you bought with them. The names change. The shape of the reward stays the same. 4 handprints of rubber meet the road. 4 small rectangles of paper meet your hand. The exchange says more than the trinkets ever could. It says, "We noticed that you came back." It says, "Your errands add up to a life, and we're willing to stamp that at truth 1 tiny square at a time." It didn't vanish all at once. It thinned. It frayed. It was tugged out from a dozen directions until one day the bell still rang, but nobody came with a rag in their pocket. Time did most of the work. It sharpened itself into something with edges, appointments stacked like plates, traffic that felt carnivorous, calendars that turned every errand into a race. The 5 minutes that used to feel like a courtesy began to feel like a tax. People leaned forward in their seats at red lights, willing the world to move. The ritual's gentleness looked, to a hurried eye, like delay. Money did the rest. Margins on fuel flattened until they could slide under a door. The profits moved indoors to coffee and candy bars, to fountain drinks in cups large enough to be their own errands, to roller grill hot dogs turning in slow hypnotic rows. A station became a convenience store with pumps attached, and the business logic followed the sugar. If the dollar lived by the register, then the plan was to get you inside, not to keep an attendant outside polishing your day. The squeegee still waited by the bucket, but the bucket had to wait its turn behind lottery tickets and cartons, and the register's little gasp when a card went through. Technology held out a hand, and we took it because it felt like power. Pay at the pump turned the world into one swift motion. Card in, zip code, grade selected, handle squeezed, receipt declined because who was keeping paper when the bank app told you everything before you'd even put the nozzle back? Pre-authorization said hello with a number larger than your fill. You trusted it would settle down later. The screen told you jokes and advertised coffee you could smell right now. And in exchange, the human interaction stepped back half a pace, then another. The little question, fill her up, moved from a mouth to a menu. Cars changed too, in ways that made help feel optional. Engines went from needy roommates to quiet roommates who do their dishes without complaint. Hoods sealed themselves like secrets. Plastic covers spread out like sleek tablecloths and hid what used to be conversational. Belts, pulleys, the art of listening. Oil change intervals stretched from next month to sometime after winter. Coolant bottles wore translucent honesty. Brake fluid sat beneath caps that asked not to be bothered. Windshields stayed clearer longer. Glass got better at refusing glare. Wipers learned new tricks. Tire pressure monitors lit small icons when they needed attention and went silent when they didn't. The car became the attendant, whispering on the dash when it wanted, and otherwise letting you pretend machines are self-contained plots that don't involve you. Laws and liabilities stacked like bricks. Spill containment, vapor capture, underground tanks that had to be replaced or lined or certified by clipboards with stern faces, insurance that charged by the what if, workplace rules that made certain helpful improvisations a paperwork festival. The cost of putting a person between you and the pump grew teeth. If one attendant could mind 6 islands of self-serve, if cameras could mind the rest, if seconds could explain the rules in language boiled to warnings, then the human piece of the ritual became a luxury line item. Luxury lost to velocity. Trust took a few small cuts and bled more than anyone expected. Drive-offs taught stations to ask for prepay. Plexiglass crept up around registers and decided to stay. Night shifts learned the grammar of caution and the choreography of keeping the door locked unless a customer knocked. The bell that once sounded like a welcome started sounding like a motion sensor, a beep in the office instead of a note in the heart. Fewer people walked toward a stranger's window. More people stared at a screen while the numbers spun, the blue glow turning faces into small moons. Consolidation ironed out the quirks. Family names over canopies gave way to brands that could be anywhere. The hand-lettered sign about bait and night crawlers went missing, replaced by a flat panel looping the same 3 ads every 8 minutes. Training manuals replaced apprenticeship. Corporate colour swatches replaced whatever shade of red the owner decided on when a cousin offered a discount on paint. The script narrowed. Welcome in. Any rewards today? Would you like a receipt? You still had neighbours, but they wore polos with a logo and learned to manage the line like traffic, not like porch talk. Even the small sounds shifted. The hose on the driveway rubber tube to bell gave way to a chime in the point-of-sale system announcing, "Customer at pump 3. The mechanical ding had mechanics in it, a little puff of air waking a real bell. The new sound was an alert, efficient, identical, not the least bit pleased to see you. Efficiency scrubbed flavour. The hum of the canopy changed too, from buzzing fluorescence to the antiseptic cool of LEDs that never flickered and never warmed a moth. Weather learned to be unwelcome. Attendants used to step into drizzle like it was a polite disagreement with the sky. Now a crew of 1 or 2 couldn't work a register, brew coffee, clean a spill, stock the cooler, and play windshield ballet in the rain without dropping the ball somewhere a lawyer might notice. The math said no. The mop won. During squalls, drivers stayed in their cars, wipers clacking, shoulders hunched, and if a stranger approached the window with a rag in hand, it felt like an intrusion instead of a habit. We changed as well, maybe most of all. The window stayed up another inch. Earbuds stayed in. The instinct to talk to the person on the other side of the glass softened from reflex to choice to rarity. We learned to measure help in how invisible it could be. We liked scanning our own groceries because it meant we were in charge of the beeps. We liked a restaurant that let us order on a screen because we could decide without feeling watched. Full service started to look to us like an interruption of autonomy rather than a gift of attention. Freedom became a synonym for not being asked anything at all. Speed prized the single task. The ritual was always a cluster of small favours happening at once. Fuel flowing while windows cleared, while tyres learned to be true, while a map unfolded on a counter. That overlap required 2 bodies and a willingness to agree that these 5 minutes were not a waste. They were maintenance of more than the car. When speed became the only hero, the cluster had to be broken into its atoms. You pumped, you left. If you wanted the other comforts, they were sold separately, in their own aisles, with their own barcodes at times when you weren't in such a hurry that you noticed the difference. Aesthetics drifted. The old stations wore their usefulness on their sleeves. Stains in the concrete, rags dyed grey from 1,000 small rescues, a cracked mug by the register that said, "World's okayest boss." The new places learned to be glossy. Bright white columns, spotless trash cans, concrete that looked power-washed by robots. The squeegee sat in a chrome bracket like a prop. The bucket water stayed clean because it had nothing to do. You could still clean your own glass, but the opera of someone doing it for you belonged to another set. Safety culture, thoroughly right about its goals, had side effects. The heroic quick top-off after the auto-stop? Not recommended. Splashes add up over years. Vapor matters. The charcoal canister in your car has an opinion. The wrist memory of feathering the trigger for an exact total? The system didn't applaud precision anymore. It applauded compliance. Gloves appeared and then vanished again. Signs advised and then over-advised. The old confidence, hand on fender, shoulder steady, half step back against the breeze, met a wall of don'ts, and some of those don'ts were hard-won truths. But the accumulation turned a craft into a checklist, and the checklist into a reason to stay inside. Credit cards took a cut you couldn't see, and stations could. The cost of every swipe lived in the gap where attendance wages would have been. Rewards programs disguised that gap by giving points back to the customer in ways that quietly encouraged self-serve. Double points when you pay at the pump, bonus cents off when you enter your ID on the screen. The math was merciless and faceless. The question, do we keep 3 people outside, had an answer printed on a spreadsheet that came from a city you could not smell from here. The roadside map tangled too. Towns grew edges like brambles. Highway exits multiplied with bewildering sameness. Landmarks became chains that looked identical wherever you went. Turn right at the Red Barn stopped working, when barns turned into storage facilities with clean fonts. Look for the quilt square didn't translate when the county banned certain signs and standardized the rest. Phones learned to say, in 600 meters, turn left, and did not know why you should wait for the second left, not the first, because the first one takes you onto a frontage road that loops you into a retail labyrinth built specifically to trap you. The attendant's pencil lost a few fights to that maze, and after losing, the pencil was asked to do something else less quixotic. Liability found the cracks in kindness. Helping a customer check oil meant touching a hot thing with a potential for burns. And if something slipped, cap forgotten, dipstick not fully seated, there was a form waiting for that. Cleaning a windshield meant touching a customer's car, and if a ring scratched a pillar or a bucket tipped on paint, the cost of the apology could buy a pallet of coffee. Every favour acquired a price tag that hung like a tag on a gift you can't quite relax about. The culture of the road shifted too. Road trips moved from let's see to let's optimise. Apps turned spontaneity into ratings. Which exit has the cheapest gas? Which restroom is cleanest? Which coffee is worth it? Stations responded with predictable offerings that could be audited. Predictable doesn't pair naturally with ritual. Ritual depends on a little nonsense, a little humanity, a little unnecessary flourish that can't be measured except by how the day feels afterward. The new system could measure almost everything but that, and yet, if you look closely, the old reasons are still on stage, even if they no longer get solo lines. People still drive long distances on tyres that whisper when they're low and shout when they're ignored. Bugs still write in summer on glass like punctuation gone rogue. Fluids still obey physics, not schedules written by apps. Maps still fold into squares. People still get lost in ways a satellite can't see. The difference isn't need, it's the structure we built around it, efficient, sterile, self-serve by default, so that a good 5 minutes now has to swim upstream to find you. It still lives in towns that have learned to keep a few old songs in their throat. Drive far enough off the interstate and you'll find a canopy with paint faded to the colour of old postcards, a hose across the driveway like a sleeping snake, and a bell that rings the way a screen door used to slam, familiarly, without apology. The office window is half bulletin board, half aquarium, prize-winning zucchinis advertised next to lost cat notices, a flyer for Friday fish fry, a scribbled "back in 5" really, pinned with a thumbtack that's been there since baseball had different heroes. When your tyre kisses the hose, someone looks up from an adding machine older than you and wipes their hands on a towel that has been promoted from white to the shade of experience. There's a place like this at the edge of a river town where the hills fold in on themselves and fog lingers on the water until coffee is gone. Mornings smell like wet leaves and gasoline, that bright metal tang you can taste behind your teeth. The attendant, third generation, the name stitched above the pocket in red thread, steps out with a nod that doubles as a greeting and a diagnosis. He already knows if you're local by where you stop. Home folks roll to the second island because the concrete is flatter there. Strangers stop at the first pump like it's a hotel desk. He asks the old question, and your answer is yes, not just because you need fuel, but because someone offering to do a small thing well deserves the chance. Lives on the coast too, where gulls run the roof like they own a lease and salt dries into maps on the concrete. The bells ding threads between wind gusts and the white noise of surf. Out here the station sells bait you can't name, ice by the block, and opinions about weather that will be right by dinner time. A fisherman swings in before dawn, truck bed full of buckets that will be full of other things later, and the attendant sets the nozzle, checks the air, wipes a windshield that is less glass than salt and story. Directions are not given by highway number, but by the colour of the water. Go till it turns steel, then turn inland. The fog is a liar that way. There is a city version too, tucked behind an elevated track and a row of bakeries that open when the sky still looks undecided. The sign says full service in letters that fought off the last rebrand. An older man with a cap worn like a crown and a younger one with a learning grin share the dance in 2 languages, switching without noticing. They keep the old rituals because here, not everyone has a card, not everyone wants to touch a pump, and not everyone sees well enough to squint at a screen that asks questions as if it's doing you a favour. The office counter holds a stack of fast-fading photographs. First cars, graduation cars, a yellow taxi that hit 400,000 honest miles, baby lifted in the air like a trophy next to a set of wiper blades that worked miracles one thunderstorm. On the prairie, where wind writes in grass and clouds move like ships, the station is a crossroads church without pews. Tractors nose up to the diesel island and talk to each other in the language of hissing caps and the creak of heavy tyres. The attendant knows who needs a receipt that shows farm diesel and who needs a handshake that says, "I'll put it on the list." The list is literally a list. A ledger with columns in pencil, names that have shared fences for 40 years, a margin full of notes about calves and rain. A kid home from college in a car that smells like library books asks, sheepish, how to pop the hood. The attendant doesn't tease. He finds the latch by feel, checks levels, turns to the kid's worried mother and says, "She's roadworthy." And it lands like permission. In mountain towns, it lives on switchbacks where brakes confess the truth about how they've been treated. The station owns a view. Peaks shoulder each other in the distance, snow holding on like a grudge even in June. Tourists arrive with noses pinked by altitude and eyes wide from 1,000 careful turns. The attendant's first act is always kind. Water to a dog whose tongue lost its sense of proportion, a suggestion to let the engine idle a minute, the casual way he leans a forearm on the fender and listens to the tick-tick-tick of cooling metal like a doctor listening to a heartbeat through a wall. "You'll want the lower gear next time," he says, drawing a diagram in the air with his finger that manages to be both gentle and unarguable. There are islands where it's not nostalgia but rule, where flame and distance combine to make someone else pumps it, less a courtesy than an ordinance. The attendants here work in bright shirts that seem visible from space. They move like lifeguards between pumps, clipping the little grounding straps, waving rental cars into place, reading faces that aren't sure what to do with their hands, and solving that with an efficient, "Leave it in park, I've got you." The ritual is streamlined but not hollow. A squeegee streaks away the glare off a tourist's windshield. A finger points to the best turn for the beach that isn't on the brochure. A warning about tide times shows up in the middle of small talk, and a family avoids spending an afternoon teaching their cooler to float. Sometimes it's a station that decided to be many things to stay the one thing. Out back there's a single bay garage with a calendar no one has flipped since a good year, and tools that have learned to accommodate their owner's hands. A sandwich counter inside has 3 stools and a recipe for tuna that involves more celery than you'd expect and tastes like a childhood you didn't have. The bulletin board is a social network built with push pins, babysitters, firewood, music on Thursdays, a note that says "Found, mitten, purple, size small," which has been there since the snow melted. People come because fuel is complicated and because hot oil and hot coffee are cousins in the family of comfort. Out in the high desert, where sun can bleach a billboard to whispering, the last station for 70 miles keeps a can of coolant and a drawer full of valve cores like packs of gum. The attendant has the slow hands of someone who refuses to be rushed by any emergency he has already met. He watches you swing in with the light on and gives you a look that weaves humour and rescue together. You made it honest. He could charge a king's ransom, but he charges what the pump says and adds a warning that the next cell signal lives out past the dry wash where the road goes silver at soon. He checks your spare without asking, taps its side with one knuckle, nods when it thumps like confidence. There are winter places where the ritual survives because the weather demands chaperones. Snow turns the canopy into a hat, air bites valves until they squeal. Drivers arrive with hoods that have been reluctant to open for weeks, with fingers thick in gloves, with windshields furred at the edges where defrosters give up. The attendant's boots know the slick spots. His breath makes small clouds while he works. His pockets carry the universe. A lighter to thaw a lock, de-icer for stubborn doors, a rag that doesn't turn into a board when it meets air. He moves from car to car like a lighthouse keeper tending lamps. When your wipers lift off the glass without tearing, it feels like someone denied February a little victory. You can still find the ledger stations, tabs written with a pencil that has a worshipful relationship with erasers. Put it on my account is a sentence you can say without irony because the person writing it down has seen you at weddings and funerals and knows what your laughter sounds like when the town team wins by 1. The total, carefully carried over when the page runs out, is less number than relationship. There's a jar on the counter that says girls softball, and nobody takes change from it. A box of dog biscuits lives under the register, and the station dog knows the sound of the bell at the door and likes the minivan with the baby who calls him Sir. There are stations that keep odd hours because the town does. In the 2 a.m. slice, when big trucks moan on the highway and the moon tries on shapes in a fast mirror, the attendant leans on the counter and talks to the night shift nurse who forgot to eat, to the musician with hands still buzzing, to the kid who was supposed to be home an hour ago and stops for air like it's absolution. The coffee is both too strong and not strong enough. A squeegee still moves across glass because bugs don't keep office hours. Out under the canopy, the bell sounds smaller, but it still sounds. Some rituals are less about audience than about stubbornness. You see it in details, a row of wiper blades hanging like winter scarves, sizes written in Sharpie on the tags, a glass jar full of fuses that no one makes anymore, and yet somehow they do, a stack of paper maps with rows that changed last year and still got you where you were going because you believed them. There's a crate of local peaches in August and a crockpot of chili in January, and a note that says back in 10 delivering fuel to Mrs. Haynes's generator, because storms still make stations into utilities and this one didn't forget. The bathroom key is tethered to a hubcap, yes, but the bathroom is also cleaner than it has any reason to be. Sometimes the sign says full service in a bold, defiant font, and sometimes it says nothing at all and you have to learn by watching. The dance happens without the announcement. Folks pull up and stay inside. The attendant approaches like a waiter who already knows your order, and if you step out he says, "Stay warm," or "Stay cool," and you do because the world outside your door suddenly feels like the living room of a neighbourhood you didn't realise you were visiting. He offers to check the oil and you say yes, and the minute is not a sale, it's a minute. When he asks if you need directions, it's not an upsell, it's weather. Now and then a car club arrives like a parade from a different century. Chrome that could signal ships lines up under the canopy. Engines cough the perfume of 100-octane memory. The attendants turn into curators without changing clothes. Hoods rise like exhibits. A cluster of heads tilt at carburetors as if they're rare birds. Someone produces a timing light from a drawer, because of course someone does. The youngest kid in the group learns how to read a dipstick with a sense of ceremony that rivals graduations. The bell rings every time another piece of history rolls in, and the sound lands on people like a compliment. You can tell where it lives by the way people greet the squeegee, not as a tool but as a member of the family doing their little dance. The water in the bucket is grey but effective, and the handle's wood is worn to the colour of a violin's neck where hands have taught it songs. Someone still folds a rag to find a clean square. Someone still drags a finger across a blade and pronounces it good for another storm. When a wiper arm is raised, it is raised with intention. When a sticker goes into the corner of the windshield with a date 3 months from now, the handwriting is legible and slightly proud. There are places where the old bell lives alongside its descendant. The rubber hose rings an actual bell, a metal tongue on a metal cup, and inside a digital chime peeps from the point of sale. The attendant hears both and respects one a little more. He can tell you which tyre set off the note because he knows the rhythm of the driveway's bumps, and which section makes sedans notice and pickups not. He can tell you which pump is going to click off early when the temperature drops, because the vapour recovery on that one likes to get dramatic. These are facts not found in manuals. They live in wrists. The full-service station survives in towns that still like to wave. People pull in not just for gasoline, but for a small recalibration of what a day can feel like. They arrive with blizzards of text messages in their pockets and leave with a windshield that has nothing on it but the view. They come in with warnings glowing on their dash and go out with small problems shrunk to proper size by a person who knew Which tool drawer held the right little valve core? The time it takes is off the clock and on a different instrument, the kind with hands that sweep, not numbers that blink. It also lives in the way people talk about each other there. The attendant mentions that the night clerk has a calculus test and how the whole place is invested in whether she eats something beforehand. The woman paying for diesel mentions her father's surgery at the big hospital 3 towns over and gets a combination of advice and casseroles. A kid in a hoodie wants to ride his bike to the state line next month and is told which roads have shoulders wide enough to wander and which ones pretend they do. The station knows when the high school band's bus will roll through again and keeps extra hot chocolate minding its own business until 100 hands show up needing it. In certain neighbourhoods, it survives as an act of translation. Elderly drivers arrive with cars that eschew screens and with eyes that tell truth and effort. The attendant meets them at the door, takes the keys, parks, fills, checks, brings the car back to the exact crack in the concrete the person recognises. He walks them inside, adds the total in a voice loud enough to be generous but not to embarrass, and does not rush the counting out of change. He offers to set the trip meter, so you'll know when you're halfway to the next visit, and the way the driver's shoulders loosen says this is healthcare by other means. On holidays, garlands appear around pump numbers, and the bell sounds a little festive even though it hasn't learned new notes. Gratitude sounds like laughter shared between a stranger and a stranger with a rag, like a kid in a knit hat clapping when the window goes from fog to clear, like the small utterance you make involuntarily when your tyres are aired just right and the car drives straighter than it did when you pulled in. The station becomes briefly, improbably, a place where errands learn to be rituals again, and the ritual remembers why it existed in the first place, not merely to get you moving, but to send you off steadier than you arrived. The places it remains are rarely loud about it. Sometimes the sign says nothing more than open, and the rest is implied by the way the door is held for you with a foot while a hand holds coffee and the other hand holds a receipt. Sometimes there's a chalkboard that declares tyre gauge works, and it does, because somebody checks it every morning like a farmer checking fences. Sometimes the hours are written as until dark, and dark is measured by a person standing outside and deciding it is now, not by a timer buried in a panel. The mechanics of it are simple. A decision to keep doing it is not. You notice, returning to the highway, that the car feels subtly different, less haunted by streaks and squeaks, less full of small doubts. You merge and realise you haven't touched your phone in 10 minutes because something more interesting happened. Another human being moved around your life in ways that made it easier. Somewhere behind you, a bell rings again. Somewhere behind you, someone steps out into the weather with a rag in a pocket and a question in their mouth that the past taught them to ask and the present still deserves to hear. You can borrow the old rhythm even at a modern pump. Pull in, let the car square itself to the island, set the brake with a quiet click that tells your body this is not another blur, it's a pause. Turn the music down one notch, not off, just enough that the world becomes audible again, the wind shivering through the flags, the pump's throat clearing, a conversation 2 bays over about nothing and everything. Phone face down on the seat like a polite guest. If there's a line, angle the hood so the next driver understands you mean to be brief and thorough, not oblivious. That's the difference between a stop and a ritual. Intention. Start with glass. The station squeegee will do if you didn't bring your own, but there's a particular pleasure in reaching into the door pocket for your small kit. A folded microfiber cloth that knows your fingerprints, a pocket spray of glass cleaner or the blue concentrate you mix with water, the little plastic squeegee with a handle worn smooth by your hand alone. Dunk, shake once, set the blade at a shallow angle, and draw the morning down the windshield in long overlapping ribbons. Flip the blade at the bottom to flick away the bead. Run the dry corner of the cloth along the edges, where water likes to cling like punctuation. Lean into the reach so you get the far corner, the one most people leave foggy. If the sun is low, Check from 2 angles so you don't inherit the kind of streak that only appears when you're headed straight into glare at rush hour. Lift each wiper arm for a quick thumb wipe along the rubber, then set them back the way you'd put a sleeping child down. Guided, not dropped. While the nozzle hums, give the tyres their minute. A pocket gauge, pencil, dial, digital, whatever you trust, lives with your registration for exactly this reason. Read the door jamb sticker, not the sidewall's max brag. Press straight on each valve so the gauge doesn't lie. If the station's air is coin-fed, keep a quarter taped inside the fuel door with a strip of blue painter's tape. It's the kind of cheat future you will thank past you for out loud. Add air in short sips, recheck, match all 4 corners, and don't forget the spare asleep under the trunk floor or hanging under the tail. It breathes too, and it will be the difference between an inconvenience and a story you didn't want to collect. If your dash wears a tired little horseshoe light, give it a second after you're done. Some systems need a mile of driving to admit relief. Pop the hood if your car makes the latch easy, and if the weather and the moment allow. This isn't a rebuild, it's a glance. Dipstick wipe, dip again, amber between marks, good. Coolant at its moulded line with the engine not hot, good. Washer fluid, top it with the winter mix if the month ends in R, the bug wash if dragonflies have been writing sonnets on your glass. You're not auditioning for a pit crew, you're keeping problems small. If space or time makes the hood a no, slide your eyes across the ground under the engine. New drips have a way of telling the truth on concrete. Make a list, live in the glove box, not a spreadsheet, not an app. Paper that remembers. A 3x5 card folded once, inked with today's miles, pressures you set, date of the last oil change. The next one by mileage, the wiper size your car actually takes, the headlight bulb code you always forget at the aisle. Tape a second card under the fuel door with the gas grade you use and the pressure targets. The memory you outsource to paper is the stress you never carry again. Breathe on purpose, 2 deep ones while the numbers spin. In through the nose until the ribs argue, out through the mouth until your shoulders forget their job is not to be your ears. This is not mood magic. It's the smallest alignment you can perform without any tools, the difference between arriving tense and arriving available. If you're travelling with kids, hand them a task that feels official. Count to 20 while I do this side window. Find the tyre stem with the green cap. Hold the cloth and be the inspector for streaks. Children who perform tiny dignified jobs at the pump are the ones who grow up knowing how to do them without being asked. Use the pump time to set a quiet course. Look at your route while the car drinks, not while it rolls. If you're navigating by phone, tilt the map and zoom until you see the whole next hour as a single picture. Which river you'll cross, which town you'll skim, which exit has too many choices to decide under pressure. Copy 1 or 2 landmark notes onto your paper card, second left after the water tower, stay on 17 when 17A tries to flirt. Your device can recalculate, your eyes can't, not in glare, not in rain. If you're nostalgic enough for a paper map, draw yourself a line with the stubby pencil you stole from a miniature golf course in 2009 and to keep promising to replace. Practice the micro-polite. Park as if lines matter even when no one's watching. Leave the bay with the hose reholstered cleanly, the paper towel you used actually in the bin, the squeegee handle wiped once so the next hand doesn't come away blue. If a person beside you is wrestling with an unfamiliar cap or a stubborn pump, offer a single sentence of help, not a lecture. Push that little latch under the handle. There you go. If someone behind you is clearly in a fire, step forward to the line where the receipts don't print and pull up again when you're done, so they can get to the pump. The ritual survives on patience. Your 5 minutes can be generous without becoming martyrdom. Seasonal additions make the 5 minutes smarter. In winter, knock slush from behind the wheels with your boot heel so it doesn't freeze into cement that argues with steering. Spray the door seals with a silicone you keep in the trunk so tomorrow's dawn doesn't weld the car shut. In spring, Carry a soft nylon pad to persuade baked-on bug opera off the leading edge of the hood without scratching. In summer, check the pressure once more after the highway heats the air inside your tyres. A pound over now is better than a pound low when the afternoon thunderstorm makes the road a mirror. In autumn, leaf bits collect at the base of the windshield where water drains. Scoop the gutter clear with 2 fingers. Your blower motor will live longer for the favour. If the station's water bucket has crossed from blue to grey to biography, bring your own. A repurposed milk jug with a pinch of glass cleaner concentrate, a rolled towel, 2 zip ties to keep it all neat. That's a trunk corner monastery. Swap in fresh once a week the way some people water plants. If you're on a long run, accept that a real wash may not happen. This is triage for vision, not vanity. Clean the outside of the driver's side mirror and the inside of the windshield right where your breath lives. You'll feel the fatigue lift 3 exits sooner than it otherwise would. For the EV you borrowed or the one you now call yours, the ritual translates without losing anything. Plug in. Set the screen to a limit that's kind to the battery if you're not crossing a continent tonight. While electrons walk in, do the same human things: glass, tyres, breath, map. Wipe the charge port collar so dust doesn't become paste. Use the pause to check cabin air filter intervals the way you used to check oil. Your lungs are the engine now. If a neighbour on the next cable looks like they're auditioning for a contortionist act, offer the trick everybody forgets. Tap the charge screen, unlock, reseat, gentle, not forceful, and the latch will usually listen. There's a glove box list that turns 5 minutes into muscle memory. Tyre gauge, microfiber cloth, compact squeegee, little spray bottle, spare valve caps, nitrile gloves folded into a flat pack, a roll of blue tape, a headlamp that makes you your own lighthouse at night, quarters for air machines that pretend to be jukeboxes, 1 spare blade for the wiper that will quit in the worst weather on a Sunday. A funnel that collapses. A small trash bag. 2 mints in a wrapper to improve any mood you encounter, including your own. Do 1 neighbourly act at each stop. Hold a door while balancing your own coffee without spilling. Return the squeegee to the other island because you see it's missing. Tell the cashier, "Pump 2 squeegees dry, can I refill?" Oh, and then actually refill it. A task measured in 30 seconds and an unnecessary halo. Compliment the person who designed the handmade sign that says, "Please don't top off" in curlicue letters. They're right, and they'll beam because someone noticed the care in a warning. Use the receipt for a minute of maintenance that isn't mechanical. Flip it and write a single sentence you want to remember from today. Something small. The heron on the ditch. The joke from a stranger. How the air smelled like pennies before rain. Crumple it and throw it out, or tuck it into the visor where you'll find it months from now and be ambushed by your own life. The car is a moving diary. It deserves an entry every few tanks. When travelling with company, deputise. Pass the card and pen to whoever isn't driving. "Check me," you say, and that they read the route back to you like a spell. Hand the squeegee to the teenager who thinks competence is a language they don't speak. Let them discover how quickly hands learn accents. Give the smallest kid the job of saying thank you to the person who empties the outside trash. They will do it with a sincerity adults can only imitate. If you're alone at night, add 2 quiet rules that make the ritual safer without making it anxious. Park under the brightest part of the canopy, with your driver's door unlocked and the key where your hand expects it. Face the store. Lines of sight are forms of insurance that cost nothing. If a stranger approaches too quickly with a story that starts in the middle, trust your feet first, your compassion second. You can be kind from inside the car with the window barely cracked, the same way attendants used to be kind from outside. Reject the myth that 5 minutes aren't available. They are. The day will spend them either way, and you'd rather choose where they go. See how much fits into each 60-second square. Pump start. Glass, tyres, glance under, breathe, route, neighbourly act, recept the trip meter. Take the trash out of the door pocket so it doesn't become geology, and go. The ritual isn't long, it's layered. Keep one indulgence in the ritual so it feels like a treat, not a chore. A specific song you only play when the nozzle clicks in. A cold grape soda you buy nowhere else. The station peanuts that taste like road and summer. A lottery ticket you never expect to win, scratched in the quiet while the squeegee drips tiny seconds into the bucket. The old stations taught us that loyalty ran on small rewards. You can build your own. Notice how the car changes when you honour these 5 minutes. Steering feels less argumentative. Headlights carve a cleaner hallway. You recognise your reflection in the glass without a halo of grime announcing yesterday. The cabin smells faintly of citrus from the wipe that erased fingerprints from the centre screen. The seat settles, not because it moved, but because you did. Leave one thing better than you found it that isn't yours. Straighten the paper towel roll. Pivot the squeegee so its blade isn't crushed under its own handle. Coil the air hose into a loop instead of a knot. These are not moral victories, they're practical spells. They shorten someone else's day by a tiny amount, which is how towns are built out of places where no one knows each other's names. Make a tiny pact with future you when you pull away. Next time, rotate the cloth out. Next time, swap the gauge battery. Next time, bring 2/4 a ritual that evolves stays alive. You'll forget now and then, that's part of it. The trick is to resume without narration. 5 minutes do not require perfection, only repetition. Teach the car its own language of reminders. Reset the trip odometer at each fuel stop so distance and time form a simple duet. When the number hits 400, you'll know it's time for the next check even if the dashboard hasn't performed its little light show. Stick the next service sticker neatly in the corner where it won't intrude on sightlines. Write the numbers clearly as if someone else will need to read them, because someone else might. Your partner, your kid, or the you who is tired and grateful for a legible past. If you end up somewhere that still rings a real bell and someone walks out with a rag in their pocket, fold your modern ritual into theirs without making a scene. Roll the window down, answer the old question with the new specifics. Say yes when they ask about the windshield. Yours is clean, but yes anyway, because the gesture matters. Listen to directions in landmarks and minutes instead of turns and meters. Let the 5 minutes expand to 6 if it means you leave with glass that gleams and a story about a trout-shaped mailbox. You'll be looking for 20 minutes from now with a kind of hope that only shows up when you drive slower for a second on purpose. If you listen closely, you can still hear it. The soft ding, the simple question, the squeegee's whisper, a thumb on a tyre valve, a map drawn with a pencil and a little kindness. Maybe the world sped up, but the road still makes room for 5 unhurried minutes of care, for your car, your nerves, and the strangers who briefly become neighbours under a humming canopy. Before you go, tell me where you're watching from and what you call it where you live. Gas station, petrol station, filling station, servo, garage. Share a memory in the comments, the bell on the driveway, the name stitched on an attendant's shirt, the stamp book in your kitchen drawer, the trout-shaped mailbox you still look for. The first time someone showed you how to read a dipstick. If you try the old ritual on your next stop, clean the glass, check the air, breathe on purpose, come back and tell us how the road felt afterward. If this gentle drift through America's small ceremonies helped you unwind, tap like, subscribe and ring the bell so you don't miss the next quiet story. Share this with someone who still says fill her up, or with someone who's never heard a driveway bell and might like to. Wherever you are tonight, city block, mountain pass, desert 2-lane, coastal town, drive kindly, see clearly, and take your 5 minutes when you can. I'm the Sleepy American, and I'll meet you just up the road.